boy has set. And even our black standard is not sufficient, because that was in reaction to the whiteness that was oppressing us. We have to go full blast into Africanness, trying to discern what that means for us. And Dr. Asa Hilliard, myself, Dr. Naim Akbar, and the rest of us that go around as missionaries to our people are trying to tell you that is the best thing you have got going. If you tap into that, you can't lose. So you tapped into Africanness in order to deaden the negative process of miseducation. You tap into Africanness in order to start to re-educate oneself and re-socialize. And it's not just for these youngsters here, it's for all of us. We have all been a part of a culture that's the negation of African peoples. And it's not just a culture in America, it's in the Caribbean, it's in Brazil, it's in Canada, it's throughout the world. The European has gotten control not only of our bodies, our minds, and our lands and resources, but he has colonized knowledge and has perverted the understanding of the truth, as Dr. Hilliard was mentioning when he finished up. It is that truth that will set us free. If you tap into that truth, there's no way that you cannot become a free African, ready to seriously involve oneself into Africanness in order to change this miseducated socialization process. But we have a lot of work to do. I went on to Columbia to get a master's in African Studies. The first person to get a certificate in African Studies from Columbia University. It was not in African Studies. It was in CIA Studies. It was in neo-colonialist studies. It was in white nationalism. There was nothing serious about the culture of Africa, the value systems of Africa, the true history of Africa there. No one talked about the Dogon and the conversations with Ogota Mele, which revealed the significance of the Dogon tradition. No one talked about the great stone cities of Zimbabwe, except that maybe they had been built by some mythical Jews, the wandering tribe of Jews, who every time there's something happening in Africa of significance, some Hamites had something to do with it, or some mythical lost tribe of Jews built these stone cities. They don't have no stone cities where they say the Jews were, but still these Jews went around Africa building all of these stone cities. And see, when you raise these questions and you deal with this, then you become anti-Semitic, you see, because you try to shed some light on this miseducation process. And the same thing with the pyramids. We have to take back our pyramids. African peoples built the pyramids to their God concept, and we can't let other people claim them. But other people seriously are trying to claim them. Since they can't claim any actual Europeans on the planet did it, they fabricated some Europeans from outer space in the chariot of the gods. These people, mythical people, came, not only did they build the pyramids, they built all the stone monuments of some people throughout the earth. And of course, these mythical people from outer space were white with red hair. See, that's the insanity of the miseducation process, that they actually go through these myths and misconceptions and make them real. So we have to understand what we're up against. I realized it when I was at Columbia University, because I could not study, when I left the master's program to go on for the PhD, I could not study Africa. Africa had no legitimacy in and of itself. These so-called great minds at Columbia University said that in order for you to study Africa, if that's where you wish to study, you have to go through Europe. Well, I tried to tell them, I already been there for 2 years. I kicked you all in the butt in Europe. I don't need to go through there no more. But Columbia said, you've got to go through Europe in order to study Africa. Africa had no legitimacy in and of itself. I'm trying to lay down to you what the deal is. I had to take courses in English and French and European economic, political, social, psychological development. Read 1,000 books on them, take dozens of classes before I could study Africa. And once I had mastered England and France, then they told me, slip out the back door and study Africa as an extension, colonial extension of Europe. Do you understand how degrading the whole process is that they have created for us as African people? And I'm going up for my PhD. So that's why I say, beware, African peoples. As the French would say, méfiez-vous, le savant qui a de PhD. In other words, beware of the so-called scholar who got the PhD. Because I can tell you at this institution that I don't like to talk about people who've invited me into their house. But sometimes the African Holy Ghost just says the truth shall set you free. I can take a poll of the PhDs and the DDDs and the BBDs here in this institution. And I can tell you that they're not teaching Africa in its fullness. That they are afraid to even begin serious research into these vital questions that they need to understand. I know it's happening at the University of the District of Columbia because it was happening down the road for decades at Howard University, where Leo Hansberry and others and Dr. Chancellor Williams were not given their proper due as great scholars at that great institution, so-called. And you know it's happening at these other places where these black brothers get these positions in these rarefied institutions like Harvard and Yale. I just went up to Yale. We had a conference last week. And one of our scholars there, Dr. John Blassingame, is not a threat. John is a very nice man. He helped teach my wife. He does not raise these questions that Asa and the rest of us raise. But he tried to develop an African studies program, and they gave him no respect. They were so disrespectful that he lost his psychic center. He lost his sense of self-respect. So if they can take one of our strongest Negro scholars and put him through a process of self-destruction, you know what they have out there for us. So I'm telling you, black folks, wake up. Grab a hold of your Africanness and let it take you where it has to. And it will transform you. Now, most of you may not believe me, so I've come up with a little chart. Because if you don't get scientific on you all these days, you ain't gonna believe nothing. Anybody standing there with an African crown and got all this little hocus pocus African symbols on and a little flowing kente cloth, etc. You don't take me serious. But once I throw a little chart up on you, then I know I got you. So in order to deal with this enormity of African knowledge that is needed to counteract the miseducation process, and we'll be getting into this in great detail tomorrow, you have to have a frame of reference. After 25 years of teaching, I've come up with a model that has helped me get the knowledge across, and it is working. If you don't have a frame of reference in dealing with this enormity of African knowledge that goes back to the beginning of humankind and the explosion of information that's revealing this knowledge in recent times, you may not be able to grasp the significance. I spoke at a school the other day, and the youngsters came to me, and they said, the students, I may look young, but I'm 52 years old, I'm over the hill. So I call them all youngsters. Some of them older than me, but they was youngsters. But they came to me, they said, Dr. J, all of that information that you laid down, it's new to us. They came up, they wanted to get the books, they wanted to take notes on the material, etc. They had trouble because it had not been laid out for them, even though they have an African Studies department, an Afro-American Studies department at the school. So I've come up with this framework to help us digest this information and inculcate it and let it be part of a transformation process, which we'll seriously deal with tomorrow. I call it pyramid analysis, because I think we need to take back the pyramids. Well, Dr. J, why do you keep on talking about taking back the pyramids? Everybody knows that the Africans built the pyramid. You all may think that everybody knows that the Africans built the pyramids. But I'm trying to find an example of something else, and I can't seem to find it, but I will find it, that other people still believe that people called Hebrews built the pyramids. And I'm trying to find an article that shows Menachem Begin, the Prime Minister of Israel, standing in front of the pyramids that his ancestors built thousands of years ago. And see, if you don't have the actual documents for black folk, they ain't gonna believe you. Even though I know all of y'all as aspiring Africans, you still got some of that black and Negro-ness in you that you gotta work with. So I have to come with my, I gotta come with my documentation now. This is Menachem Begin the Prime Minister of Israel, grinning like a Chessy cat, standing before the pyramids. And there's Menachem Begin talking to Anwar Sadat. And it says, dancing in peace at the pyramids. For Menachem Begin, the glorious moment was not at Camp David, nor was it in Washington, when several months later when they signed the peace treaty, nor was it even in Geneva, when the one-time, quote, terrorist, an obstacle to peace, accepted his share of the Nobel Peace Prize. For Menachem Begin, the shining moment was in April 1979, in the first official week of peace, as he stood in front of the pyramids, the structures, quote, that my ancestors built thousands of years ago. So don't tell me that they're not still running that game about themselves building the pyramids. And that's why I have to say very strongly, and I'll repeat it again tomorrow, that the ancient Hebrews, so-called, had nothing whatsoever to do with building of the great African pyramids of Giza. And in fact, as Dr. Ben and others have told us, they did not exist at the time that the great pyramids were built. And you have to put a timeline to that to understand that. And if you put an African timeline, which you've got to develop in order to understand this information we're talking about, you'll find that by their own traditions, Abraham leaves Ur in Mesopotamia, Chaldea, and comes into the Nile, 1600 or 1700 at the latest BC. And the process of interacting with the Africans of the Nile takes place. The pyramids have been scientifically dated in Giza to have been built in the 4th and 7th dynasties, 2700 BC. There's a 1,000-year credibility gap that I try to tell my so-called Jewish scholar colleagues. You've got to deal with the credibility gap. And the way I lay it out is this way. If you want Abraham coming from Ur, if you want Moses and the Ten Commandments, if you want the Exodus at the time of Ramses II, then you've got to give up my damn pyramids. Just lay it out. But don't do it like I do it. See, they know I enjoy it. Do it like Asa would do it. Civil, logical, reasonable. But I'm trying to tell you black folk, no matter how you do it, you're in trouble. The fact that you even know it means you're in trouble, because a lot of people have invested money, time, and effort in your miseducation. And it's not going to be an easy process of changing that. So I have come up with the formulation which I call pyramid analysis, pyramid consciousness. That we have to take back the pyramid, and we have to use the pyramid as a symbol of the duality principle, a symbol of the polarity in the universe, the laws of the universe that all of us represent. Look at our biology as the human family, the male and the female are representing a duality, a complementary duality. Look at the human body itself, 2 eyes, 2 nasal passages, 2 lips, 2 lungs. There's a duality in nature. And the Africans understood that and mastered that. So I've created a duality in terms of the poles of development. And at one pole we have what I call the thesis. At the opposite pole we have the antithesis or antithesis. And at the top we have the synthesis. And it's my basic intention that we have to develop the thesis for us is our essence. Our essence as Sun people, African peoples. And it's built around a value system of African humanism. And the antithesis is what I call ice peoples, the European experience, European American materialism. And as we search for truth and knowledge in dealing with our miseducation, we have to be able to move between the 2 poles in order to be able to fully discern the truth. And that search for truth and knowledge is what we have to be about at whatever level we are, wherever we're starting, whatever books that we have. Because what do we have to do? In order to be true to ourselves, in order to destroy the miseducation process, we have to move to the top of the pyramid. And we have to create, and I tell my students this, you have to create your own synthesis of that information that you find at this pole, as well as that information which is at this pole. And only you can go to the top of the pyramid. No one can do that process for you because going to the top of the pyramid involves thinking, becoming a thinking African VIP. And you can be helped in the data bank that's here. You're experiencing this. If you go for the PhD and all that mess, you're right here. We can help you. Asa and myself and others can help you here, Tony and Jim. But only you can go to the top of the pyramid. It's a lonely hall, but it's a beautiful hall. Because once you have knowledge of the greatness and significance and the fundamental, crucial, primary nature of African peoples, you want to go to that top of the pyramid and become a thinking African VIP. Not a thinking African very important person, that's a European dimension. A thinking African VIP, an African that understands his values, an African that's clear on what his interests are, an African willing to die to oppose his principles, an African VIP. So this is where the work is. This is the process that we have to begin to deal with. And when we understand that these poles are encapsulated or are wrapped around a circle representing the fullness of systems. And we're talking about understanding that the world that we live in has this European condition, and it's very real. It has the African condition, and it's very real. But we have been told to stay away from tapping into Africanness. But you can't be true to yourself, black people, if you have tapped out of the African experience. You can't be truly educated if this is where your knowledge bank is, because any synthesis that you develop is a dislocated, disjointed synthesis. It does not have that level of truth that you had to have. In order for you to be true to yourself, you have to develop the African pole. And so you have to be about it very seriously, and it should start as soon as you can. You can't call yourself truly educated if this is a blank. And for most of us, it's not a blank. It's a negative. That we are taught and trained and processed into seeing things African as a negation. And so we turn automatically away from that. My wife with the Whitfields designed a black doll, the baby Whitney doll. And we have been bewildered, but then we also understand the negative process of socialization, that black youngsters, black families, move away from the black doll. And the people that are attracted to the black doll are white folks. It's a sad commentary, but it is about us having our mind taken from us. And we cannot restore ourselves until we free our African mind. Then when we go to the top of the pyramid and we become part of that capstone at the top of the pyramid, then we will understand that this enormous knowledge that we have to begin to analyze within the concept of what I call pyramid analysis, and that knowledge is called caps. We have to begin to see it in terms of concepts. Knowledge is grouped into a special relationship. We have to understand, just as I mentioned, one of the key concepts is socialization. Another key concept is the duality principle. Another key concept is the centrality of the female principle. These are things we'll be talking about tomorrow and how we can put them into a full African curriculum, which can't start in the school system. It has to start in the homes. It has to start in the minds of the African woman who's going to raise these children and produce these children and strengthen these families. So concepts becomes key and crucial. And then you have to have analysis. Analysis, concepts is the grouping of knowledge and understanding. Analysis is how you view the knowledge and understanding. And as my brother Asa was saying, you've got to have an African-centered view on the knowledge in order to be able to understand. When you leave here, go out and check out that map that they have, the New Peters map, the African world map, and you'll be able to see the extent to which the European has twisted, distorted, and perverted knowledge, that even the map of the world represents his attempt to put himself at the center. A map going back to the 1600s, to the 1500s, 1530s, 1560s, when that map was designed that we now see in back at ABC and CBS. The map that you see in the museums, the map that puts Europe at the center. If you put Europe at the center, you distort everything else. If you put Europe at the center, then the equator drops down to the lower third. If you put Europe at the center, then India, which is 1.3 million square miles, is smaller than Scandinavia, which is less than 400 square miles. Then China, which is 300 plus million square miles, is smaller than Greenland, 2 or 3 times smaller than Greenland, which is less than 800 square miles. Then Africa, which is almost 12 million square miles, is smaller, twice as smaller than the Soviet Union, which is 8 million square miles. That's why you have to study. They have even taken the map, and when you put Europe at the center, it distorts everything else. You've got to have that African center in order to be able to analyze the knowledge that we're talking about. Because if you do not, then you'll get lost in what I call the dilemma between form and substance. And we'll get into that tomorrow in trying to explain that. And then we have to have processes. Processes are forces that control the ideas and knowledge. Concepts is the grouping of ideas and knowledge in a certain relationship. Analysis is the views on ideas and knowledge. And all views on ideas and knowledge come at you with a certain VIP, a certain set of values, a certain set of interests, a certain set of principles. Anybody that tells you they're being objective, you need to question him very seriously. Anybody that tells you they're being scientific, you need to raise some serious questions about their scientific or pseudoscience. Knowledge comes at you from a certain set of values, a certain set of interests, and a certain set of principles. So you need to ask as you watch the TV screen, who put that program together and why? What are their values and what are their interests? As you read these books, you need to ask yourself, whose values, interests, and principles are being served? When you see Shaka Zulu, we may have thought it was an epic about African history, but it's about the destruction of the African mind, the denigration of an African hero. And we need to watch everything that comes across the TV screen because it is a part of that destructive process. So we have to be aware of those processes, the forces controlling ideas and knowledge, and the value systems around them. And then we have to think in terms of systems. Everything is systems related. We have to understand that everything is systems related. That's the most fundamental understanding you have to allow youngsters to have. They have to see themselves as part of a system, a family system, a biological system, a social cultural system. They have to understand when they ingest food, it's going to affect their internal system. They have to understand when they ingest ideas, it's going to affect their system of their mind development. We have to make systems analysis as a key to our understanding of what things are all about because the European has mastered systems analysis and he's using it to destroy us. He doesn't do anything unless it's cold calculated in terms of destroying the African image. Look at all the things around you. They're going to come back with another Cleopatra. And she may not be Elizabeth Taylor, but she's going to be somebody else that looks like that. They may come back with something on Tutankhamun, the boy king, and he's going to be looking like one of them. They don't hesitate in distorting the history and turning it upside down. Why? They seem to have to do it because at the center of that which they are about are major conflicts in understanding the history of the world. In other words, the processes of miseducation that have been put in place at every level in the culture of the European is based upon what Dr. Franz Kress Welsing has been trying to tell us, that they are at war with us, that they have instituted a genocidal process for our destruction. It's not just about the school system, it's about our family systems, it's about our employment, it's about our social psychological development, our psycho-spiritual development. They have designed a system for self-destruction. It is not by accident that we have more youngsters in prisons, young men in prisons, than we have in senior colleges and universities in the United States. It's not an accident. It's a part of the system. It's predictable. It's not an accident that our young people are selling each other crack and self-destructing. When you tamper with somebody's socialization process and they don't have a sense of self-respect, then that is going to be the result. But black folks, we have to change all of that. We have to change it. It has to begin with our families. But we have to challenge the school system. How many of you have been about any lawsuits challenging the school system? As Dr. Asa here was trying to tell you, if we start bringing some suits challenging the miseducation process in the school system, something's going to change. Because for white folks, the name of the game in the school system is money, a paycheck. There's no mission to raise these African minds and help them develop. It's a paycheck. You bring some lawsuits and start threatening people's paychecks and some changes are going to take place. But if you don't have the sense of self-purpose and mission to bring these lawsuits, the same old is going to happen. The French have a saying, I fall back on my little French training, le plus ça change, le plus c'est la même chose. The more it changes, the more it's the same thing. If you are not there monitoring, laying out what should be done, and making it accountable to yourself, miseducation is going to continue under another guise. They're going to call it multiculturalism. They're going to call it infusion, perfusion, collusion, and we're going to think that we got something, and we don't have a thing. I'm speaking from my knowledge. Asa is speaking from many, many years of this type of experience, but I was asked to evaluate the curriculum of the state of New York, K through 12. When they asked me to evaluate, I said, do you know who I am? You know, you always have to ask people this. Even Negroes, do you know who I am? And where I will be coming from. What VIP will I be bringing to the table? Values and interests and principles. So they said, yes, we want you. Why? Because this task force in the state of New York have been trying to deal with this question of equity and fairness and a review of the educational system for 2 years, and they haven't been getting anywhere. So they asked 4 of us to come on as consultants about 8 months ago. And we worked like dogs. I didn't know what this thing was going to be about. And I went to the task force. I said, do you know how I'm going to approach it? I'm going to approach it and seriously look at these things to an African standard. And I know what I'm going to find. And are you prepared to fight for what we find? Because there's going to be a fight. And the committee, most of them assured me that they were prepared. And as we went through the evaluation process, and we got serious about it, it blew my mind. Asa never told me the devilishness that white folks have been involved in terms of educating our people at the below the undergraduate level in the public school system. It was a tragedy. We looked to 150 documents of the New York State Department of Education, syllabi or syllabuses or whatever you want to call it, on math, science, social science, music, language, drug education, health education. And there was not one single document worthy of being used to educate African children. There was not one single document worthy of being used to educate Latino children. There was not one single document worthy of educating Asian American children. There was not one single document worthy of educating Native Americans. And these were the 4 consultants brought on to look at these things. So we had to come up with an indictment against the system. And that indictment was included in a report which was called a curriculum of inclusion. But what we should have really said was a curriculum of exclusion. What we hope to devise and develop at the next stage is a curriculum of inclusion and infusion with Africa at the center. But the curriculum is a curriculum that has been specifically designed to destroy the psyche of black kids. And as I began to look at these documents, and I know you all don't believe me, so that's why I know you're all trying to say, you mean you were a consultant for the state? Yes, and they paid me thousands of dollars. They paid me thousands of dollars. And finally, some black woman, Dr. Hall, on the committee, she said, Dr. J, you have to understand that you are key and crucial to this process. You're the head consultant. This stuff would not have been done if you don't get it done. The Commission of Education is waiting. The governor's waiting for this report. Black folks have not been able to produce it, so it's making us all look bad. You are key and crucial. Don't think that you're just a radical or this or that. You are necessary. So once the sister told me what I had to do, I got busy and pulled this report together. And of course, I went too far. You see? I told them if they really want a deal, they got to develop what I call pyramid analysis. And I presented this to the task force. And I said, look, this is my model of not just putting a few black dates and faces in the curriculum. That ain't don't change no miseducation. You have to put black folk at the center and make it crucial. Why? Because the New York State Board of Regents says that one of the major objectives of education is to develop self-esteem. That you can't have proper education if self-esteem is not at the heart of the educational process. And how can you have self-esteem when there's nothing in the educational process for black youngsters and brown youngsters? So I pointed out to them